The Stafford Gambit is one of the most dangerous traps online, but it's also completely busted. In this video, I'll show you the one single line that you need to remember that gives white a winning advantage out of the opening. No theory, no branching moves, no traps, just a guaranteed win. After this, you'll never lose to the Stafford Gambit ever again. The Stafford Gambit begins after e4, e5, knight f3, and then knight to f6. If you normally play something like the Italian opening, you're hoping black plays the move knight to c6 here, in order to get the starting position of the Italian. After the move knight to f6, this is known as the Petrov's defense, or the Russian defense. And theoretically, your best move is actually to capture this pawn. Then, the starting position of the Stafford Gambit continues with black playing the move knight to c6, officially gambiting the pawn on e5. And the Stafford Gambit begins after knight takes knight, and then d takes c6. The idea of the Stafford Gambit is that black has gambited their e5 pawn in order to gain a lead in development by having open lines for their bishops and already having the knight developed. A lead in development is nothing to sneeze at. If white is unprepared, this opening can easily lead to checkmate within just a few moves for the black pieces. However, if you are prepared with the white pieces, this is an easy line to refute 100% of the time, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. When we're playing against gambits, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that we're already ahead in material because the opponent has gambited a pawn. Therefore, part of how we should play is that we should try to be very, very solid and very, very safe in order to hold our material advantage. There's no need to overextend and push for a win when we're already ahead in material. The best way to play against a gambit is to simply play defensive, play solid, and just let the opponent burn themselves out with their disadvantage in material. In this position, we have to notice that the knight is attacking our pawn on e4, and we have a few options of defending it. The two most likely options that make sense are to defend it with the knight to c3, or to defend it with the pawn to d3. Keeping in mind our mindset for how we play against gambits, we should choose the option that's the absolute most solid and safe, since we don't really need to push for an advantage when we're already up a pawn. The move I recommend here is to play pawn to d3, which is the most solid option in order to defend the center pawn. Now in this position, nearly 100% of players, as black, are going to play the move bishop to c5, putting pressure on white's f2 pawn. The other idea of this move is that black wants to play the move knight to g4 in order to set up two attackers on the f2 pawn. Knowing that black's idea is trying to put the knight on g4, what we should do is try to develop a piece, also making progress in terms of castling. The best move we have to prevent the knight from going to g4 is to develop our light square bishop to e2, which also sets us up to be able to castle and get our king to safety when the opportunity comes up. Now, one example move that black could try, which isn't super common, is the move queen to d4. The idea of this move is pretty obvious. It sets up a battery with the queen and the bishop to try to set up mate on the f2 pawn. If black plays queen to d4, very simply we can just castle, and our rook protects the f1 pawn, and there's nothing to worry about. So remember that the idea is that queen to d4 pretty simply just gives white the opportunity to castle, and there's not really any more problems from the white's perspective. Really important as white, you don't make this typical blunder of playing bishop to e3, thinking that I'm attacking the queen, because this hangs the b2 pawn, and it's not very good for white here. The best move in this position for black to try is actually pawn to h5. The idea of pawn to h5 is pretty straightforward. Black wants to be able to play the move knight to g4 anyways, and they're setting up what is known as a fishing hook. If white were to capture the knight, black would capture with their pawn and open up a file for their rook on the h file. Meaning that if white were ever to just castle, black could play a move like queen to h4, setting up a very deadly threat with the queen and the rook, and this weakness on the h file is going to be a very serious problem for white's king. So now we know what the idea of the move pawn to h5 is from black's perspective. Really, 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 really important in this position. If you remember one thing from this video, please, please, please remember this. Do not castle before we play c3, d4. Do not castle before we play c3, d4. And one more time, do not castle before we play c3 and d4. The problem is that if we castle without blocking this bishop, black is going to play knight to g4. And if we play a move like pawn to h3, trying to kick away the knight, black is going to ignore it and play queen to d6, setting up a mate in one threat with the queen. And if we capture the knight anyways, they're going to capture with the pawn, and they're still going to have this mate threat with the queen and the rook. And white is definitely going to lose this game. So again, if black plays h5, do not castle before we play c3 and d4 in order to block the bishop. After black plays the move pawn to h5, based on my mini rant, I think you can guess what the idea of our position is going to be. We are not going to castle. We are going to play the move pawn to c3. And if the knight goes to g4, we're going to play pawn to d4 in order to block the bishop from the f2 square. Again, if black plays h5, do not castle, play c3, and pawn to d4. Now in this position, I'm going to quickly take a look at two different moves that are pretty common from the black's perspective. If the bishop just moves away, say bishop to b6, we're going to play the move pawn to h3 in order to kick away the knight. Of course, the same trick doesn't work because we haven't castled. So if black ignores us and we capture, they cannot capture with the pawn because it would hang the rook on h8. So we're going to play pawn to h3, and then the knight's going to have to run away. And then finally, once we defend the e pawn with a move like knight to d2, we're ready to finally castle our king, and there's no more threats that we have to worry about as white. And we've officially come out of the opening, ahead of pawn, ahead in development, and with a huge monster center that's going to be really hard for black to get rid of. And finally, after we play the move pawn to d4, the last move I'm going to take a look at that's pretty tricky from black's side is to try the move queen to h4. The idea of this move is that it sets up a mate in one threat with the knight and the queen on f1. And if white just unknowingly castles, there's also a mate threat on h2 as well. It's pretty simple. As long as we see both of those threats from this queen, we can see that the best way to defend it is with the move pawn to g3. And once the queen moves away, say to f6, in order to once again set up the mate in one threat, finally, we can just simply castle, and the king is finally safe from all the threats. Once black's bishop moves away, we can even play pawn to f3, and then the knight has to run away to a terrible square like h6. And once again, white has a huge monster center. Black's queen is going to become a liability later on in the game. And white is simply just having a completely winning advantage right out of the opening. And this is where black would probably say, "Oh no, my gambit." And that's how you refute the Stafford Gambit. This line is all you need to be able to consistently win 100% of the time against the Stafford Gambit. If you want help destroying any other openings, let me know in the comments below, and I'll make a special video just for you. If you want to see how to crush the Jobava London, you can see it with the recommended video here. But other than that, good luck in your future chess games, have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.